Hi, I'm John Stewart, Chief Investment Officer of Farmers Trust Company. This is the Investor's Edge.
The Investor's Edge, Market Insights with John Stewart, is brought to you by Farmers Trust Company.
Hi, I'm John Stewart. Welcome to the Investor's Edge. First up, the week in review. Major win for big tech. Well, there's been a lot of concern in recent years that big tech is getting a bit too big, and that many of the large tech firms are able to exercise monopoly-like powers over the marketplace. Nevertheless, big tech won big earlier this past week as a U.S. District Court judge in Washington, D.C. ruled that Google can retain control of its Chrome browser and Android mobile operating system. Now, the ruling also included the ability for Apple to retain Google's browser exclusivity, which includes around $20 billion in annual revenue payments. Shares of Google rallied about 9% on the day after the announcement, and shares of Apple were up nearly 4%. So it seems like the message is clear, for the time being at least, and that's that big tech reigns supreme over the U.S. economy and the stock market. Bet against them at your own peril. For this week's featured insight, sentiment clues are key. The stock market has been hitting new highs recently, and everyone seems convinced that investors are wildly optimistic and bullish, which typically means that it's time to be more cautious. Looking under the surface, though, there's still a lot of skepticism out there. The American Association of Individual Investors survey shows only 33% of participants are bullish and 43% are bearish, the rest being neutral. 65% of investors have either become more bearish or stayed neutral since the beginning of the year, versus less than 20% that have become more bullish. The CNN Fear and Greed Index is also at a very neutral reading of 51 on a scale of 1 to 100. So bottom line, this is hardly what you'd call a euphoric market with everyone throwing caution to the wind, and that creates conditions for further upside as the investors who are sitting on the sidelines decide they need to jump in the ring. Looking ahead, rate cut guaranteed. Well, they say that nothing is guaranteed in this world except death and taxes. Well, I can pretty much guarantee we're going to get a quarter-point rate cut from the Federal Reserve later this month. The market's pricing in about a 98% probability for that rate cut, and the Fed has never failed to deliver when the market's been pricing in odds of a cut of at least 80% or higher. It's also safe to say that the stock market is already expecting that cut, so don't necessarily expect a big rally on the news, as the markets have already priced in that expectation in advance. What the Fed says about their outlook for inflation and economic growth, and their expectations for further rate cuts going forward, will be key. Once again, I'm John Stewart. Thank you for watching The Investor's Edge.
The Investor's Edge, Market Insights with John Stewart, is brought to you by Farmers Trust Company.